From Svitek comes a weekly digital series where he shares his insights, concepts, and findings learned during his 15-year journey of working in the entertainment industry. Each lesson offers you a roadmap to overcome the challenges that all artists face on the path to success. Welcome to a Phil Svitek podcast.
Hello, dear creative. My name is Phil Svitek, and it's an honor to have you on this very special episode because I get to interview my dear friend Ken Napzok. Now, he's not appearing on the show simply because he's my friend. There's a lot more to it than that. For those of you who know me, know that I'm a big advocate of mastering mental fortitude in order to achieve your creative endeavors because, let's face it, it's not just talent and luck that wins out and gains you success. You need to have the right foundation. And when I talk about Ken Napzok, I've known him for going on 7 years almost, I would say, and he exemplifies true mental fortitude in my eyes. He is a producer. He does a lot of stuff behind the scenes, whether it's in podcasts, YouTube content, and things of that nature, wrestling and so forth. Like his resume is just to be honest, quite tiresome just to read. And not only that, but he also goes in front of the camera as well through stand-up comedy and his hosting and so forth. So he has been in this business for quite a long time, knows a lot, is very humble, speaks eloquently, and has a lot to offer. When I interviewed him, I was certainly learning a lot. And so it is my aim for you to be able to take away the same lessons that I learned and whatnot. Now, we interviewed at his place, and unfortunately, I only had one camera, and the setup didn't lend itself for both of us to be on camera, so I set up on him. So, for the most part, you'll just see Ken, even though obviously there's times where I'm talking, so I do apologize for that. But, it's forgivable to me in the sense that what he has to offer is worth it, even the dead moments when you're just hearing my voice. One final thing before I jump into the interview with Ken is that all of his projects and various things, you can find it on kennapzok.com, and that includes his Star Wars book, Why We Love Star Wars, his stand-up dates, and his various podcast shows and so forth. So I strongly encourage you to check that out. And for those of you familiar with Ken, hopefully this interview with him is more than just some of the regular stuff that you've seen and heard from him. I believe that we cover new territory, so I'm excited to share that with you. So without further ado, please enjoy my very wide-ranging talk with Ken Napzok.
So Ken, I've had the pleasure of knowing you for a couple of years now, and I'm glad we got to catch up.
We only catch up over podcasts in this town, but yeah, it's been like 5 years, 6 years coming up. That's crazy.
Yeah. Time flies. One of the, I was going through your website, and hopefully we'll dive into all the things that I got to know, but just reading your bio in general, I was exhausted. You do a lot of stuff.
Yeah, me too. I'm exhausted. Too much, I guess. But this digital media age, you gotta build your brand, do all those good things, but then it's really just finding the one thing that works or takes off. I don't know, but that sounds cynical. I'm not cynical about it. I really enjoy doing what I do, which includes podcast writing, doing the book now, pro wrestling from time to time, getting back into stand-up comedy, which is weird. Why choose?
Yeah.
If you don't have to.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And I love kind of how you got your start in radio and really you got back into that in a very interesting way. It's not like obviously when you and I went to college or whatever else we could dream of being podcasters.
No.
And yet here we are, and it does allow us to offshoot into these various things that are awesome.
100%. And I always say, I should have started sooner because when podcasting really, I started hearing the term mid-2000s, right?
Yeah, 2005 is when the technology started. 2010, if you were an early adopter and you were smart, you were like, okay, I'm in.
That's the sentence. If I was smart, and I wasn't. I was arrogant. I was fearful of change, of new technology, because I was a radio guy. I started radio in 1994. I had reel-to-reels. I had edit things with razor blades, and I just was like, what's this new thing these people are doing. I was in radio, kid. And man, what an important lesson. Because I started 3 years later. In 2012, I started producing for the Schmoes. They were starting like 2011, but like 2013 is when I launched the Napzok Files. What an idiot I was. I could have had 3 years on just my numbers, my business, my identity. Stupid, Phil. It was stupid.
All right. Well, but I mean, still relatively speaking, in terms of the boom of podcasting, and some people saying we're in a bubble and things like that. I don't necessarily believe it.
No.
But people like in terms of the seriousness of it, it didn't really hit for me until 2017.
Yeah.
And then like all these celebrities started getting into it. It's like, oh, it's the cool thing to do now, as opposed to like, well, we've been doing it for years.
Yeah. What's some of those articles that pop up? The new thing and the celebrities revitalizing this industry. Yeah, I get it. They're going to get the headlines, but yeah, it's been going strong for a while.
Yeah, it's just in terms of that. Not that I want to spend like this entire thing on podcasting, but like what progression have you seen? What do you like? Where it's headed? What perhaps don't you like?
What I think I like where it's headed is it's slowly moving more towards radio with the ability to live stream. That's something powerful. I always record live to tape. Generally, rarely do I do edits, for better or worse. It's just what I'm used to. I keep my ums and uhs in, but I like where it's heading. Where it's. I like that my mom will now know, hey, what a podcast is, all jokes aside. Yeah. I like that it's normal, because I used to always say, if you could get podcasts in a car by a press of a button, the industry would explode. This is like 2013, 2014. An app in a car, if I can search for a gas station, if I can get a satellite podcast version, it takes us to a new level. And I think we're getting there, if not there already. And it's because broadcasting, radio it's the most intimate form of media. You carry these people within your lives. I remember one time we switched the news, or we did the news and sports on our morning show. So we used to do it like 25 after the hour, and we did it one day like 35. And someone called and was like, dude, you made me late to work. Because I thought it was only 6:25 and it was 6:35. And that's how closely associated you are with the shows and broadcasters and those voices in your ears. And I love that. So it's already there and getting bigger.
Yeah, no, it's amazing, absolutely. And whenever I don't have ADD myself, but whenever I do this, I have ADD. So we're gonna jump around. I apologize already.
No, let's do it.
But I want to get this, because I'd be remiss if I didn't ask this, and we ran out of time. One of the things I really appreciate about you is, whether by choice or not, you're a mentor to a lot of people. And you're also a great mediator, in the sense, not that like fights are happening left and right, but obviously in this industry there's personalities and that can clash, and you have a great way of just calming everyone down before things hit the fan.
Yeah.
And A, were you aware of that yourself? And B, like, I don't know, like, how do you look at that role?
Yeah, that's a great observation, man, and I appreciate you taking the conversation in that way. We can talk about Star Wars later, but I do that a lot. I have always been in some sort of a mentory role. I don't know. I don't know how that happens. I don't see myself as seeking leadership or being in front of the line or anything, or great leaders in the back of the line, all those things. But I have been that. I started coaching like Little League in 10th grade. One of my great joys was coaching a winning baseball team, and it wasn't the wins and the lack of losses. We had a great season, but I remember working extra time with the kids, teaching them little lessons. You got mad at strike 2, but you still had strike 3. Yeah. Don't get caught up on strike 2. And like, I had that in me, and then it kind of grew. And I became supervisor at my job and a director of security, and I still communicate. And I wasn't perfect, man. I wasn't. No one can be. There's some employees who probably hate me, but there's a few that I still talk to who are like, man, you got me through this. Not just job stuff. 2 a.m. calls. I was like the first to find out they had a baby on the way before their parents. It happened like 4 or 5 times, calling me, crying, "Hey, boss, can I talk to you?" Like, and so I don't know where that comes from, and that desire, and I like doing it. But I have the nickname, my girlfriend uses it, of Kenny No Bothers, which I'm just kind of, not to drop another sports reference, but like Joe Torre, when he was a manager in the Yankees, would just kind of sit in the dugout, hand on his chin, And he'd get mad. He'd be an Italian guy. He'd get passionate, but no matter, he just calm. And when I was a Little League coach, one of the dads came up to me and was like, this is the first season in like 5 or 6 that I've not been thrown out of a game from the stands as a parent. Because anytime I got mad, I looked at you in the dugout and you didn't seem worried. Yeah. So it comes from that. Doesn't mean I don't get stressed, angry, blah, blah, blah. We can talk about that stuff in a therapy session. But and stuff you're talking about, I find myself, there was a birthday party I had years ago. Sorry, I'm monologuing, Phil.
That's why we're here.
There was a birthday party I had years ago, and I remember looking around, and there was pockets, little cliques and groups, because they didn't know each other. Yeah. The only connection was me. And I was like, that's interesting. It's work friends, it's my police buddies, and it's my comedy buddies, and this, and it just, that was an interesting self-observation of like, what is it about me? Maybe it means I don't take a stand. I don't know. I think a little bit is just I can see, like, I always do case-by-case basis, common sense, and take a breath. Yeah. And sometimes, yes, we can all get, it doesn't mean I have not been upset about showing up to a show and go, why are we doing that? But then having a moment to go, well, we're all humans here. Yeah. Let's figure this out.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, there's so much in what you said. It's absolutely fantastic. And I know personally you've helped a lot of people. I think, like, I know, like, Roxy has, she's been, Roxy Stryer, she's been public about, like, how much she loved having you over at Screen Junkies and just working with you. And yeah, there's just this natural presence that I love. And you're the nickname Pit Boss, right?
Yeah.
That, I mean, it makes sense along with your other nickname as well, where you're just kind of...
Yes, watching and observing. I mean, that truly came because on the Schmoes show, they switched the days of the show, and so I had to work and head over, and I had a suit. I wore a suit, and so I looked like a pit boss. But it some people, I always say our interns at the time, they're way more talented than us and doing great things. Cody Hall, Christian Ruvacabla, Andres Cabrera, Robert Butler III, from the Schmoes days. They all independently was like, I was afraid to meet you. And I'm like, really? I hate myself. I'm self-loathing. I just want to go home and play video games. But it's just, I guess you put on a suit and just have that calm demeanor. The pit boss thing worked, even though I fought it at first. I was like, this is silly. That's silly. And it's still kind of silly. But yeah, there's something there.
So speaking of the Schmoes, one of the things, they're very much skewed towards like a wrestling sensibility.
Yeah.
And that worked for you because you have a passion for wrestling.
You do.
Where did your passion for wrestling come from, and how did did you guys ever talk about like marrying the two in the early days of Schmoes? And because like the pit boss itself, like that's a gimmick, and so if someone just says like, hey, even the word gimmick, you're like, okay, I get it, because it can tie to wrestling very easily.
Wrestling started in my life young, 7 or 8. I don't remember exactly when. And then at one point, my now late uncle and my father, we used to watch as kids. But they weren't dedicated fans, but so they weren't against it, But then at one point I learned like it's a work, and they told me the fake word, right? Which is not entirely true when you really get into it, but it's a work, it's a predetermined, it's a show, it's an art, it's in combat improv theater. I went away from it. I was like brokenhearted, like I felt lied to. And then about 12, I came back, and it's once you get it, it's the pomp and circumstance, it's the characters, the gimmick, and there's also valuable. I really do believe there's valuable life lessons in the story of wrestling matches, and sometimes the good guys win, sometimes the bad guys win. Most of the time, the ref gets knocked out, and all hell breaks loose. Right? That's something I've said before, and I carry that into conversation. With my friends in wrestling, I will have conversations about Game of Thrones. They'll be like, hey, did you see last week's episode? Oh, yeah, they put Jamie in the semi-main with Tyrion, and he went over, and we just have this weird conversation about wrestling, not even trying to. So there's it does go into other areas. As far as the Schmoes, Harloff was a wrestling fan. Harloff worked for WWE for a short time in the early 2000s. And when we were comedians, we connected over it because he I think one time he came backstage and was like, did you hear that joke? And I said, oh, man, the audience pot for that. And that's very much a wrestling term. I think more people know it now, but back then he was like, oh, Oh yeah, and I, when you form, whether you know it or not, you're forming characters, and sometimes that can get exhausting, or sometimes you run the course of that character. But even on a podcast, especially like Schmoes with a cast of characters, he was smart to kind of try to build up those personalities, and that's where it came from.
So you mentioned there's a lot of lessons in wrestling. Give me like maybe like the top one, or three if you can't like pick one only. Or
yeah, I think it's truly going in front of the camera. There's some stuff to learn behind the camera, behind the locker rooms, which are more tough, more real life stuff. But on camera, it's just a simple story of, it's not even as a good versus evil, but it's a story of trying to overcome obstacles to get your goals and what can get in the way. And a good wrestling story usually is about a good guy, a baby face, chasing a title, chasing a bad guy who'll do anything to win, and at the cost of his own morality. And like, that's the kind of basic stuff there. When a match tells that story, the fans connect to the drive of one of the reasons Stone Cold Steve Austin became so big is because he was fighting his boss, and who doesn't have anything of that? And so again,
he also drank beers, which
and who doesn't want to drink beer on the job? No. So yeah, there's a lot of violence, there's a lot of other things, a lot of silliness. Wrestling can be a bad industry too. There's dark sides to it, both stuff that they did in the ring, especially in the 70s and 80s and beyond, like some of the stereotypes and everything they perpetuated. Yeah, I get it. But wrestling at its core is just basic human storytelling, and I think it is that quest for your goals and what's in the way and how do you overcome it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I love that. There was a question about the Schmoes that I had. Now I'm drawing a blank. All right, we'll revisit it maybe. Since we're on the topic of kind of your loves, it should be noted you have a huge love of Star Wars.
Yeah,
and I'm sure you've done so many shows on Star Wars and things like that. It's almost hard to like say, deduce a question out of it. But what would you like people to know about your love of Star Wars, or just Star Wars in general, that perhaps you haven't talked about?
I think it's just how basic and simple Star Wars should be viewed. And I always say Star Wars is understood best by adults, but it's loved best by children. Mm-hmm. And it's pure and unadulterated love. When the first time I talked about Star Wars regularly on a show, I'd appeared on a couple podcasts, but it was Jedi Alliance on the network you helped build. And me and Maude Garrett got to do a show, and when we were tasked with creating the show, and so we met at my place. And again, 2014, times have changed, and it's not, who knows if I would approach the same way. I mean, I think I would, but it wasn't like, how can we tear down? How can we put our idea? It was just like, hey, we're Star Wars fans. What's fun about being a Star Wars fan? Let's talk about this. Do you like a TIE fighter? Do you like an X-Wing? It was simple joys, because Star Wars is pretty simple. That's how George designed it. Like a morality tale for 12-year-olds. And I always go back to that, even in the other shows I do. And the industry has changed, and now it's so funny. It's become nerddom, fandom. It's become like sports was, and I'm a big sports fan. And I moved away from sports a lot about 5-6 years ago. I was just tired of the sports radio talk, and everyone's got a hot take and a thought, and none of that's bad necessarily. I don't fault anyone for that, and you can make a career out of it. It's great, but it got in front of my joy. Mm-hmm. Instead of watching, I'm a Miami Dolphin football fan, so there's not a lot of joy there for me, but like, watching 3 hours of pregame, like I was like, oh, the stats and the figures, and then I just forgot to remember when I was a kid and I liked watching Dan Marino throw a football, and I moved away from it. Now I find myself moving back to sports because nerddom fandom has changed from when Maude and I started, where it was like, hey, we like Star Wars too, to how anger, violence, threats, terror. There's terrorist groups in the fandom that have names and group names and everything, and it's gotten in front of the joy of loving this, and that's what I'm always going to try to put out there. Is that what motivated you to write the book? Why We Love Star Wars? Yeah. And just the title alone kind of almost indicates the message of, let's get back to basics. It really, and I got to give credit to the publishing team at Mango Publishing. I had a more pedestrian, reasons we love Star Wars type of thing, but love was there. But yes, because they kind of, as the book was coming out or getting written, they were like, okay, they at first didn't understand what we came to an agreement on what I was going to do. I was going to write about the 100 greatest moments in Star Wars. But then they started getting the first few chapters, and they were like, "Oh, these are little love letters to Star Wars. This isn't about new insights, or occasionally I might throw something that you didn't know, or I give a different perspective on a scene that you might not. I don't like that part of the prequels. Well, here's my view on it. I've had some people say, "Oh, you've changed my view," or "You maybe look at it again." But what I keep getting is, "Man, you're making me emotional because I experienced that too." And these are adults. These are people in their 40s, 50s, 30s. Every generation of fan. I had a young female fan quote tweet something I wrote about Rey because it captured what she felt about Rey, and I was real proud of that. But I've also had a 60-year-old dude who was in the theater in '77, like, "Wow, you took me back to that moment," because I think it's just so hard in anything. So we can take this conversation outside of Star Wars real quick of forgetting the childlike joy of your passions, including podcasting, broadcasting, or I get caught up in the things. And there'd be times back, working the Schmoes podcast at AfterBuzz, the studio there, and we were trying to scramble for our next view or next click, and I would just be, "Wow, wait a minute. If you were told me at 14 that I'd be hanging out with friends talking about movies, and I got to meet Roddy Piper, and I got to hang out with I'd be this is the best thing I could hope for."
Yeah.
Doesn't mean there's not challenges. Doesn't mean you can't be realistic about some of the problems or get tired of things or move or try to better yourself. But go back to that joy. You'll find you might be where you want to be.
So speaking of that joy, selfishly, I'm very curious, and in terms of what I try to deliver is helping creatives through mastering mental fortitude, and so I want to talk about the writing process of the book. How did it come about? What were some of the challenges? Just even the length of time that it took. And
I wish I had a little bit more time to write it. So Mango Publishing is a great independent house out of Miami. Independent, so it's small. It doesn't have a lot of the resources, but it's a great, legit publishing house there. And they had written, they worked with Alicia Malone, who and she's written 2 books with them, and it was through her that I got connected. And I talked a lot about Alicia because it's like with Alicia about it, because I've written a lot. I've written screenplays, everything, and I tried a book when in my 20s when I had no pressure and I just didn't know what I was doing. But guess what? I still didn't know what I was doing, because how do you actually have to do it? And she gave me some tips and everything, but I think a lot of it's just finding your way. But she had said there were some nights where my head was hurting, my soul was breaking, I didn't know how to write. And I was like, okay, I got it.
Were you able to revisit a lot of the content that you have created on Star Wars to just pull, rather than have to reinvent the wheel of descriptions? Let me just pull that.
So funny you say that, because when I met with the publisher, we talked, and there was a couple other ideas on the table that I was thinking about that weren't Star Wars. Like, what if I did this and this? But it's it makes sense. They're all about, they're not like a influencer publishing house, but they seek out a lot of people that have a built-in fan base, right? Just business sense. So it was like, no, Star Wars is the thing. And I was like, okay. Well, I'd done a podcast on Force Center, my podcast feed with Joseph Scrimshaw and Jennifer Landa. It was like a 50th episode, and I did 50 things I love about Star Wars. So I thought, well, okay, what if we do that, but I do 100? They're like, great. And in my head, Phil, I'm thinking, half the book is already written. This is easy. So I went back, I downloaded the podcast, the file, I had the notes, and I realized only 20 of those things on the list could I even use now. It was done, I think Rogue One had just come out, so now more movies and shows. So just on a technical level, I was like, I know some more, and there's some things that have surpassed it. And then of the, say, 20 that I was like, okay, at least I've got 20 written. I can just transcribe what I said in this podcast. Nah, that was a shortcut, and there's no shortcuts to it. And I had to roll up my sleeves, get in and write. And sure enough, there were nights where Alicia was not wrong. I was crying. I was throwing things at my head in a pillow, literally screaming to myself in my apartment, I cannot do this anymore. I do not know what I'm doing. And then you take a breath and then write something, and then the publisher would be like, this is my favorite essay. And then there'd be one where I was like, man, I nailed that one. And they'd write me, this one needs some work.
Yeah.
Your focus is not clear. So, you go through a lot, and I think that's the creative process, and you shouldn't fight it. You should fight through it, but no shortcuts. No shortcuts. Just can't be.
This is a theory that I have, and I'm trying to gain. Either prove it right or prove it wrong.
Okay.
I'm fine if it's wrong, but I find that 80% of the creative journey is really for you. The last 20 is for the audience. Meaning you're like, okay, I've gone through the mental exercise you're talking about. Yeah. You get to a point where like, okay, I've solved it, but you still have to kind of put it to paper or whatever else.
Yeah.
Would you say, A, that's true? And if so, how did you fight through that last 20% where it's, you're done with it creatively, mentally, you've gone through everything?
Yeah, I think that's right. I don't have the science to back it, but I think your theory's right, sir. It's peer reviewed right here. Yeah, because it's not about 80%, and I know what you mean. It's like not about 80% from my glory and success, but what do I learn about myself and the confidence? Artists are, and creatives are tremendously sensitive types, or they see the world a little differently, and that's not to disparage anyone who is not a creative, My mom used to say, and no offense to garbage men, please don't take it like that. She said, I just sometimes wish you were a happy garbage man, meaning I wish you just had a job you showed up to that you were happy and fulfilled with, and you had a life outside of that you loved, versus I was going through a lot of depression and suicidal thoughts, I was kind of, going through therapy, all those things, by the way, not just reserved for creatives, but that was just more blown up and bigger in proportion because I was a creative person who had these, as my therapist used to say, your job has no end line. There's no finish line. Because even if you think you've reached a finish line, a new line emerges or a new goal, or that one didn't work. And so that's when I hear you say 80% is for you. It's to discover yourself, to get better at this, to grow. And then eventually the 20% for whatever's in that 20% is letting it go. Yeah. And that's the hardest thing. There's copywriting errors in that book. There's a factual error that I made that they didn't catch, and I don't know why I made it. I just blanked on a name of a Star Destroyer. And luckily I was able to correct it in the audio version, but I literally lost nights of sleep because the book is published. The book is out. I can't do anything about it. And that's the 20% of, like, I didn't do it for all this. Yeah. I did it for the journey.
Yeah,
I think you're right.
That's really cool. If you don't mind, I want to kind of explore what you talked about in that. Part of, as a creative, like, for me, everyone always looks to the technical side. How do I do this? How do I get to the top? And for me, without the foundation of mental fortitude, is just kind of the term that I use, your legs will buckle. Yeah. And I don't care who you are. And I look at this industry like it's a shaking tree. And if you could just hold on, you'll find some success. I don't know what that success is going to be or look like or where, but you'll be in the game. Yeah. And so I want to, if you don't mind, I wanted to kind of explore that a little bit, like, the hurdles, the struggles along the way. Because, I was getting to a point where, like, I for me, my legs were buckling a little bit. And I did the same thing where I sought therapy. For me, it was a kinesiologist, because talk therapy for me doesn't work, because I know I could easily lie.
Sure. Oh, that's
that I knew about my,
Oh, there was days in my therapy I was like, I'm giving him an answer I want today. You're not wrong.
So if you
let's dig in.
I don't know the specific question of how to kind of an entry point, but just I guess the biggest challenges that you faced, and
it's always going to be personal. This mental fortitude concept's very interesting and true, because I think for me, so this is again from my journey, I'm most held back by what I do or think or keep myself from doing. Apathy has always been a problem. You mentioned technical stuff, like your
apathy. Let me, if I might point a microscope, apathy in the sense of what? Because for me, the interesting part I learned was success was almost like a given. And so, like, I never found joy in success. It was just like, oh, I'm supposed to do this. Yeah. Whereas if I didn't accomplish something, that was like, wait, something's off about this. And in a sense, I could, if you've ever heard the term, the locus of control, which is basically people my whole life has said, you're smart, you're gifted. Right. And that's actually a negative thing, because then in a sense, it's beyond my control. Whereas if you tell a child you're hardworking, then the accomplishments themselves are due to that person's control rather than outside their.
That's interesting. So when I mention apathy, I just mentioned sometimes I get a little lazy, a little set in my ways, and I'll work on it tomorrow, and I don't care. Like, I get held up on, you mentioned technical stuff, like we're in my podcast studio, which is good, but I'm trying to get some cameras set up so I can live stream better. I kind of can't figure it out. I'm not 14 and don't have YouTube skills, and so I just go, all right, we'll figure it out later. And that's the apathy. But you just touched on something else where I think going to some of my issues, I was one of those, quote, gifted kids, pulled out of class, pulled into what was called GATE out of my here in California. I think it was other places too. Gifted in talented education or something where, so it's cool. Yeah, you tested above a certain level. And the idea was, we don't want you to be bored by school. Come get engaged in this little room, resource room. I was bored by it all. And I never buckled down to work hard for it. It just kind of, and not that being told you're special is a problem. That isn't it. You should tell your kids they're special. But yes, there's something powerful in the fact of, I saw an essay years ago about this. Someone wrote about this. I am the type. If you tell me, Ken, can you write me a short story and give me 2 weeks? What am I going to do? I'm going to write it on the night before. And I'm going to hate that I do that, but I'm going to do it good, and you're going to go, wow, you're a great writer. And in my head, I'm like, I know I could have been better. Yeah. That's not self-loathing. Like, it could have been better, but I waited the last minute because I know I can come through. Mm-hmm. I know I don't need to put any work into this. I got pulled out of class, didn't have to do my homework, and got told just, look at some special, high intelligent reading books as a kid, whatever. And I don't fault anyone. You can't fault anyone. Just like when you at one point realize your parents are real humans who didn't know how to raise you, did the best they can. It's an interesting thing that does tie into some of my stuff. I don't work as hard as maybe I should, and I work a lot, and I work hard, and I put an effort, but I know I can do more, but I also know that I could just turn on a microphone and it's going to be okay.
Having gone through the journey that you've gone through, like now, where do you sort of draw the line of, like, yes, I could be working hard versus I'm just beating the crap out of myself for no reason?
It's a good line. It's a fine line, isn't it? It's a great question because I do both. I don't know. Maybe on the inside. I always, lately, on one of my podcasts, I talked about feeling good, which is you have to let yourself. So I just returned to stand-up recently after 5 years or so of last time I did it, and 6-7 years of doing it regularly. And I had a great set at the Comedy Store.
Was that your choice or just
Mark Ellis tricked me. He tricked me, Phil, and I want that on record. He knew that, to his credit, and there's a good mentor character too, he knew to his credit that I probably wasn't done, even though I thought I was done. But he never said it, and he never did it, and he just started bringing me around shows. I started hanging out at the Comedy Store. And it wasn't his goal to just, I'm going to get Ken to do comedy. He just, maybe you don't hate this as much as you did. And then I started hosting shows with Makuga, live on stage, Josh Makuga. No scripts, no jokes, no bits, just on a comedy stage hosting a show, which, again, I don't need to prep for because I can do that, right? Comedy you have to prep for. Anyways, it slowly started working, and to his credit, it's a sign of a good mentor. He wasn't like, get back on there. Maybe sometimes some people need that, but he could see. The next time I hosted, I was like, hey, remember that thing we did last time, Josh? Let's do that again, but we add this joke. It'll be funnier. And Mark's like, oh, you're writing a bit now, huh? Oh, like, damn it. So long story short, I started doing shows. Josh couldn't make one of our shows, and I had to do a set. I had to be a comic again. Yeah. And I did it, and I killed, and that was funny and great and felt good, but...
Did you use new bits, or...
I wrote it on a plane. Wow. We flew from Burbank to San Francisco, and I wrote my set on the plane.
That's incredible because that's a short flight. It's not like you're going to Boston. You got 6 hours to come up with stuff.
I was like, I guess we better do this. And a little bit, it's funny. It's a little bit of what I just was saying of, I had 2 weeks to prepare, by the way, but I got on that plane. But in the whole time I thought, I'm just going to do what Josh and I have been doing. I'm going to make stuff up for 15 minutes. I have improv background. I can do that. But as I got up there, it wasn't laziness waiting till the last minute. It was like, as I'm on the plane, and I have my choice to put my headphones in and sleep for 35 minutes or 40 minutes on the flight, or do I be a comic again? Mm-hmm. I was like, what if we tried to be a comic again? What would that be like? And I did it, and it's been great. And then I went back to the Comedy Store, Belly Room show with Ellis in September, and I Phil, we killed. It was a great show. But then at the next morning, I started running through all the list of excuses of why it wasn't as good as it felt. Well, the audience mostly knew me. Well, it's the belly room. It's not the main room. It's 40 people squished in a room, different feel than 200, right? I got away with a joke there because they knew who I am. And then I stopped and I was like, what if we just enjoyed this? Yeah. What would that do if you just enjoyed a success in your life? And that goes back to what you said about the fine line between when are you being honest with yourself and when are you beating yourself up. I think you have to learn it individually over time, and sometimes maybe with some help, because I still do it.
And your next set is November 16th? That's the next slated one?
Yeah? Next slated one, yeah. Hopefully some ones will pop up before then. November, we're going to Washington, D.C., Ellis and I and Makuga, and doing some comedy out there. So that's fun, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, but I'll be more prepared.
No, excellent. No, and when you write comedy, what do you gravitate towards? Like, what's the type of humor you like? Has it evolved in those 5 years?
Yes, it's always a self-reflection to a fault. I also feel that's the safest, and comedy hasn't changed, but the way the world takes it certainly has.
Does that scare you? Because I mean, now there's pitchforks everywhere. I feel like
it does. I understand some of the pitchforks. I understand it. I worry about it overall. Stand-up comedy is very protective, much like pro wrestling, very protective of itself. And so the general public's seeing that, and they're fighting against that. Oh, these comics are circling around these other comics. Yeah, we're just very protective of the craft. It worries me a little bit, but then I always live by a case-by-case basis approach. So the dude getting fired from SNL before he stepped on the stage, like, okay, let's see what he said. I clicked on it and went, I don't know if that was a joke. I don't know, so I can get that. Where some of the Chappelle stuff that's popping up, whether I agree with the joke or not, or understand or share his point of view, he's an artist doing his thing, and the stand-up stage is supposed to be that. So it's in my mind, but that's why I've always found it easier to turn back on myself a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And then find themes and the lessons there too. But it's so funny, back in the day when I was really doing stand-up a lot, 05, 06, 07 range, and even 03, 04 when I started out, like, I remember when my mom was like, well, I mean, and she hadn't really seen me do comedy, but she was like, you're talking about your depression and your suicide and stuff like that, suicide attempts and everything. Maybe people just want to laugh. And it's not that you can't joke about that stuff. It wasn't a joke. I was on stage just really working through stuff, and you have to be careful of that. So that has changed. Where now, yes, it's a reflection on myself. I take a couple shots, some little circumstances outside of just my own life, but the approach is comical, intentionally comical. Yeah. Not mean. I've never been mean-spirited, but I used to do the Schmoes movie news, right? And that was Dennis Miller style, making fun of things. That started to change because I felt people were more protective of a movie. If I made a joke about Transformers being bad and someone loved that movie, then I'd get a little more attacked, where earlier I didn't. 2013 range, I didn't. 2015, I was.
Would it be like if you made a joke that was heartfelt in a way, like, like for me, I love The Matrix.
Yeah.
But I can nitpick the crap out of that movie, and it's like, well, it is what it is.
It goes back to the fandom conversation where we've forgotten the simple joy. Star Wars is really silly, and I take it so seriously. But it's so funny to see it now taken so seriously in the wrong way at times by a lot of different fans. And I've been guilty of it too, where you get defensive. And it's like, well, like George loved like Hardware Wars, which was released in 78, is the first official parody. George loved it, and I loved it too, grew up with it. And it's totally making fun of Star Wars because they loved it. Yeah. And I think people forgot, especially with my Schmoes News, like some people would write like, oh, this guy seems so arrogant. He seems so, but like, I'm playing a character and I'm just having fun because I love all this stuff. And wow, you took that way too seriously. I just did a little joke about the Transformers, but times have changed. So when returning to stand up, the jokes are mostly about me and my self-discovery and my journey. It's just easier.
tangential question. Do you think film critics in general, just by the sheer volume of movies we watch, we start to become cynical by design?
I think it's possible. I mean, I still think film critics are their jobs to critique more than be critical. That fine line. I saw one of them tweet out recently, and I think they get unfairly attacked. But also, I know back in the day, it was, and nowadays, I don't mean this cynically, and I don't mean this dismissively. Anyone can pop up and do a YouTube channel, right, and be a movie critic. And the Schmoes were the first official MPAA recognized critics who were on YouTube. That's one of their things on their resumes, and a lot's changed since then. So I don't want to dismiss or downplay, but I think there is an art to being a film critic that's not recognized by a lot of people, versus now it's just like, why did that character show up there? Plot hole, movie sucks. But as far as your question about, it's possible. It's just too much content, too many things out there. Luckily, I'm not a film critic, so I don't know.
Fair enough. I want to go back to an earlier point that you mentioned about you were almost upset that your fans were at your comedy show, and so therefore it didn't validate it.
Yeah. That's weird, huh?
It is weird, right? And I see creators all the time of like, oh, well, it was just my friends and my family that came out to my show. And it's like, well, why is that a bad thing? If they made up the entire 20 people and you're just starting off, so what?
Yeah. It's so true.
And, one of the things, like, I don't know, I want to get your take on this because when I see the making of movies and so forth, and you see like George and Steven Spielberg, there were classes of people and they were all rooting for each other.
Yeah. And
I don't know if this is the same for you, but I feel like whatever our class would be of artists, we don't necessarily share that group journey, if you will. We're kind of very individual and to a degree get jealous. And my New Year's resolution was like, well, if I'm going to support anyone's art, why shouldn't it be my friends? And why not? Like, that just makes sense. And let's be a class and grow together.
Yeah, it's so. Yeah, that's a great, especially in stand-up, because stand-up is this really jealousy-fueled individual world. And I'm guilty of it too. But like, it's funny, you see other folks, and it's easy to like, wow, they got that good gig, whatever. And it's like, then I have to ask myself, well, did you want that gig? Did you try for that gig?
Yeah.
Is that the life you want? Maybe that's their journey. You should be happy because they're really nice. And look, occasionally, I know of some folks that behind the scenes, maybe you're like, oh, if only people knew. Let's put that in a different category, but discuss your other thing. I love that you mentioned Lucas and Spielberg and Milius and Coppola and De Palma and all those guys from that era, because I'm obsessed with those type of eras. And it doesn't mean that they weren't competitive. In fact, it might have been a healthy competition.
Yeah.
Spielberg's doing Jaws. I'm going to do Star Wars. I'm going to do this. And then they work together. I'm going to do a Bond movie. I got something better. It's called Indiana Smith. All right, let's do it. I love movements or times and I love reading about it. So you have the early 70s USC era. Not everyone went to USC, but that era of film directors, and the auteur emerges, and stand-up comedy in the 70s, the Comedy Store, Leno, Letterman, Pryor, Williams, all these people going up nightly, and it's crazy. Saturday Night Live around the same time. All these sketch comics, and mostly Canadian, meet in New York, and they create something that's still going 45 years. I'm obsessed with Sunset Strip, different eras of hair metal bands. I'm not even a hair metal band fan, but wow, they're all over the place. My late uncle, he would tell me the story of going to the Whiskey A Go-Go and seeing the Doors as a house band, and walking next to David Crosby on the sidewalk. And I'm obsessed with peers doing great things who maybe at the time don't know they're doing great things, but they're all kind of there with each other doing it. It's a great thing. And again, not that there's not some individual problems and jealousies, everything. And I do kind of wish we had more of that now. It's definitely not that.
Yeah, no, it's a little tough. And one of the things that I try to tell people is just, it's okay to be jealous, but use it as a barometer of like, okay, well, this person has what I want. So how do I attain what they're going after as well? Rather than like, oh, well, now I have to kill this person. Metaphorically speaking.
Metaphorically.
Sometimes literally, unfortunately.
No, it gets really... it gets really weird, like where I'm happy for some people, but you look at their life and you're like, well, if I had, that's the life I wanted. And I used to joke. Jimmy Fallon went to the Groundlings, joined SNL, became a Weekend Update anchor, and is now hosting went to the Night Show. In high school, that was what I told people I wanted to do. Right, and Jimmy and I, he's a little older than me, a couple years, but like I went to I got as far as the Groundlings, and then got out of it. Right, got asked to leave, all those good things. Didn't get SNL, not hosting the Tonight Show, and I used to be Fallon, man, living my life. And I'm just like, well, but that's what? Like, I went this way. Yeah. And he went, and he had different talent level than me or different energy. Tried to, I at one point in about 2011 or 12, realized I had not put any blood on the tracks, or at least as much blood on the tracks as I thought. Hollywood's not working out for me, man. Like, oh, cool. Have you done this? Have you done that? What's your latest headshot? I don't have any. What's your website? I don't have a website. What are you doing? I played Madden all weekend. Like, I had to realize, what am I jealous of? I'm jealous that I'm jealous that they've worked. Not what they got, that they've worked. So, it's a hard thing. But you have to police yourself all the time.
Yeah, you do. It's but it seems like you've kind of... Yeah, it's a great self-realization. Speaking of your website, because I know I'm going to forget if I don't, you have a tab for charities, which a lot of people, when they have their personal website, they make no mention of anything like that. Why was that important to you?
It became important to me. It's not like I'm out there every weekend with my sleeves rolled up. Feeding the homeless. And I think I want to make that clear, that not that I wouldn't like doing that or anything, but it's like, it's on there because I realized at one point, I'm not one of those people that's tweeting about some of my political views or getting rolled up in the issues, but it doesn't mean I don't care or I'm not involved or I'm not reading the newspaper every day. And I also see there's just a lot of hate out there, a lot of anger. And I'm not doing the either side thing, but like, you know what I mean? Like, I could see some of my friends on the left, and I'm just looking at their Twitter feed every day going, man, I know there's problems, but have you smiled today? And then I look on the other, like, oh man, there's no common sense in what you're saying. Like, and at one point I just realized, well, what can I put out there? And I want to be in charge of my own destiny, what goes on around me. The conversations about Star Wars are positive. Doesn't mean I don't occasionally criticize, but I choose my words. Someone once said to me, they're like, I know you didn't like that Star Wars novel as much as you said on the review. Why? As if I was a shill. And I was like, no, I chose, if you go back and watch, I chose the way I criticized the book carefully because I didn't want to put out unnecessary scorn, hate, or anger.
Yeah.
So the charity thing came out of, there's a lot of other things that you can get involved in and that helps the world. And I had been a bone marrow donor 10 years ago. A friend of a friend, her daughter died at 2, one of those bone marrow cancer things, and they did a drive in her honor. So, of course, I'm going to come down to the hospital, take a couple swabs, you're done. 3 years later, I got an email, hi, you matched with someone. And I started to go through the process, and the getting bone marrow out ain't easy, right? But I ain't no hero. I'm here to do it. Rolled up my sleeves, and then I got an email. They're everything, blood tests, everything's great. We're going to go to the next phase. And I got an email that said something has changed in the situation, and they don't tell you what. You don't know if they passed away. Maybe they gotten better. You don't know. And I just remember it's more important to highlight that kind of stuff. When I can. And then in building this Patreon era and this do-it-yourself era, community has formed around my silly little shows. Mm-hmm. And in talking to some of these folks, I put it up on my Discord page, like, hey, have you got any charities? Because I've got a couple up. And I was helping my cousin. My cousin's a teacher now out in Vegas. She's a 3D engineer teacher. And it's a second career. She had a great career as a beverage manager for casinos, and some stuff happened, and it's a shady business, and she got ousted out of it, and she didn't know what to do, and decided, I'm going to teach. Mid-40s, I'm going to go start this career. And she's teaching 3D printing to kids, but she has no money for supplies because that's how, unfortunately, schools work now, right? Yeah. So she has to handle it herself, and a 3D printer. So I was like, okay, I don't have a large platform, but I have a platform. Let's put that out there, do a little charity drive. So I went to my listeners and was like, what do you have? And people came out.
That's cool.
Oh, I got
awesome.
this, and I got this. And so what you see in that charity tab are some of mine. I think, some friends of mine. Michelle Boyd's got one. My girlfriend Grace Hancock's got one up there. My friend Stephen Stanton, a voiceover guy, I put a pin at that. That factors in, Stephen Stanton. And then I got a lot from my listeners, and I want more. And I forget sometimes, Phil. Sometimes I'm like, oh, God, I got to go back and highlight. I want to do more there. So it's just, again, you're putting something out there that's positive. And I'm not the only one that does it, and others do it better. But I just was like, come to this. It feels weird to say, come to this website. Here's all the things I do. Ain't I great? And to not have a tab go, I'm also a human, and have these thoughts and cares and concerns. It's just that simple. And it happened. So Stephen Stanton, a very successful voice actor, a lot of Star Wars stuff. He's Admiral Raddus in Rogue One. He's Captain Tarkin in Clone Wars. Does a lot of Star Wars stuff, a lot of other things. His manager's a great guy, great character named Dutch, and his partner, Miss Kathy, and they're great people. They're really wonderful characters. And they're like, no, we will always be involved in charity. And we told Stephen and any clients, that's what you'll be doing a lot. And they do a lot with like Starlight Kid Foundation and everything. But like, we have a lot. Yeah, not even money. We have a lot. So you're going to give some of your time and use some of your career to focus on those that need it. Like 2 years ago, they told me that. And I was like, it makes me feel bad for not doing anything more.
Well, yeah, Obama has a great quote. I used to be in, like if you can't solve it 100%, it's like, is it even worth it? And he has a great quote of like, better is good. Is it better?
Yeah.
Then that's good.
Yeah.
So listen,
yeah.
Whatever you're doing, it's better.
It's better.
And that's good.
That's good. We'll take it.
As we wrap this out, is there anything that you want to kind of share that maybe haven't shared, or just final thoughts of like encouragement or whatever the case may be?
Is for the creatives out there, which is a lot of what the focus, what you're doing is you mentioned a little bit of the marathon, not a sprint, that tree shaking thing. When that tree is shaken and you're trying to grab on, I think make sure you know what you're grabbing onto. And that you're pursuing, that you're there for the right reasons, and there can be bad reasons to want to be in this town. But also, I'd say a lot for creatives out there, again, because the end line is shifting, the goalposts are moving. I wrote a book, my first published book. It feels great. It's only the last thing I've done. I now have to worry about what's next, right? So I didn't hit some finish line. I'm not on a beach drinking Mai Tais. You have to keep, so that can get daunting. I always say enjoy the process. Enjoy the journey. The 80% you talked about, Phil, you have to learn to enjoy that, and not just convince yourself to enjoy that, actually enjoy it. I think that's really, really important, because you're going to go on 10 auditions this week and probably not going to get any of them. But the next one might change your life, and you have to keep training and getting ready for every audition as if it's the next one's changing your life. The next connection could change your life. I don't know, you know, my career path, where I'm at now, being in a day job that I hated and all those kind of things. I met Christian and Mark in 2003 doing stand-up. And in 2012, they wrote me and said, hey, would you like to produce our show? In 2015, that led to a job that ended a day job I wanted to end. And the jobs I got, and the very job I got that I left for, didn't exist when I moved to this town. You mentioned it earlier. We couldn't go study, be podcasters.
It's fascinating, right?
I didn't know what I needed, and I needed to enjoy the process getting there more. It took a long time. It took me a long time, Phil, but I'm not done yet, you know? And I think if you're listening out there, you're trying to create a podcast or YouTube channel, or you're Twitch streaming, or you're writing a book, or you're writing a screenplay, and you want, like, buckle up. It's going to be a while. It's going to be topsy-turvy. That tree's going to shake. But you need to enjoy that, because that ends up being more what it's more about than when you get that big yes or go picture or that first check. Yeah. So concentrate on that.
And friendship too. We didn't go into it, but the schmoes them, you know, but like when you talk about like the class, the schmoes is a good example of rising with your friends. Which I love.
Yeah. And occasionally punching them, but you know, it's important to have support around you. I used to, when I moved to town in 1998, it was like, well, you got a network, kid. I used to, you going to Hollywood? You got a network, and I didn't know what that meant. Is it
Most people don't.
Is it passing out business cards at parties? I don't know. I don't know if that works. Or is it connecting with people on an individual level, and they rise up, and maybe you rise up with them, or maybe you don't, and being okay with it. I just, as you recorded today, I got a notification, an article. One of my friends, an old roommate, has just got an amazing job. He has to move to Canada. He's a creative director for a studio now, and it's not going to directly help me because it's more in animation, which I don't work in. But like,
you don't work in yet.
Not yet.
You know what I mean?
But you don't work yet. But it's like, so maybe there's something, because he and I have tried to work on stuff, and I'm not saying, but it's like, he and I met in 2001, and we were so broke as roommates that we'd have to like share Del Taco combo meals while we sat at home dreaming about what we could do to get out of the situation. And it's taken a long time, but I'm so happy. And it's like, wow, that's networking. It's a connection that's real and shared and enjoyed. It's not going to a party. And I had a situation. There was a party, some parties that you were in attendance, Phil, where we got told before we got huddled up, you need to get 3 connections tonight. And we're like, what? Like, what are you talking about? Yeah. I want to go party with Phil. Like, what are you doing? And that is, to me, not what you do. What you do is go build real connections.
Well, it's also funny because people, they tout like all the stuff that they've been doing, and and might want to make a true, genuine connection. But it's like, okay, if I'm going up to you like, hey, Ken, I'm a great editor, I'm a great podcaster, X, Y, and Z. It's like, okay, great. And if in the best case scenario, you want me for the job, but it's like, wait, I didn't think that through. I don't want the job. I just want, I want you to just pay me. I don't want to work.
I don't want anything for this.
Yeah. Like I was just lying to you, half that stuff. Yeah. Like, I want to go to the next party tomorrow night and do the same thing and get paid just to do that. Like people think the networking part is the job. No, the networking part is supposed to give you the job, and the job is going to be really hard.
Yeah, exactly. And believe me, people want to work with people they feel they can work with more than what your resume says. And look, have your skills, build your skills. That's so funny. That's so true. So true. That's so true.
All right. Well, I think that's a good place to end.
Beautiful.
That's it for this lesson, though. But please feel free to click over to any of the numerous lessons I've created just for you. I have so many you can check out, along with other free resources. All you have to do is go to my website at philsvitek.com. And if you prefer to learn by reading, well, then I'm thrilled to announce that I will be coming out with a book that not only teaches my principles, but also provides exercises so you can put these ideas into action. Follow me on social media for upcoming details on that. Lastly, a huge thank you to the people that helped make this episode financially possible. If you too would like to support the show, you can do so by either heading on over to my Patreon or sporting some of my merch from my store. Links are down below for your benefit. Or you can just tell a friend about this show and we can build a community of like-minded creatives. That sounds wonderful, doesn't it? Anyway, thanks for taking the time to tune in. I know your time means a lot. I'm at Phil Svitek on social media, and I'll see you next time.